Thurn and taxis, how to set up and play. First thing you'll do is lay out the game board. You'll then sort the carriage cards by their value number and put those on the game board. The values are 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. There's a carriage card in each value reserved for each player. Next, you'll shuffle the deck of city cards and deal 6 to the starting display. There are 22 cities in the game. They're organized by province, which is color. There are 9 different provinces or color. So you've got the purple, the light green, the dark green, the light blue, the dark blue, the light brown, the red, the orange, and the dark brown. The cities are also grouped into 5 different scoring regions that may or may not include different provinces. So this scoring region you can see has light blue and dark blue. It includes this province and this province. So you're going to take all of these bonus tiles, you're going to sort them in descending order, so the highest point is always on top, and you're going to do that for each of the 5 different scoring regions in the game. You're also going to put out the route length bonus tiles organized into the stack for the 5 route length, the 6th, and the 7th, again in descending victory point order with the highest value on top. The final victory point chits are the all provinces with the highest victory point on top, and the 1 bonus victory point chip for Endgame Trigger. Each player is going to get a company color card and 20 post offices. These are limited. Finally, randomly select a start player and you're ready to start the game. You're going to want to indicate who was the start player, because when the end game is triggered, you finish the round so all players have equal turns. So for example, if the last player triggers the end game, then that would happen immediately, no more turns. So on a player's turn, they must first add a city card to their hand, then they must play a city card in front of them, and then finally they have the option of scoring their route if it's at least 3 cities long. Also on a player's turn, they can get the support of one of these officials, but they can only get the support of one official each turn. So before selecting a card from the display or maybe taking one from the deck, the first official that they may choose to get help from on their turn is this administrator. If they select this official, they can discard all of these cards to a discard pile and draw 6 brand new cards to the display. And whenever the draw pile runs out, simply reshuffle all the discards to form a new draw deck. When adding a card to your hand, again, you can select from the 6 visible, or you can draw one blindly from the top of the deck. Let's say this player selects this one. When a card is drawn into their hand, this immediately gets refilled. Now, the other power, or the other official they may want to use this turn, is the Postmaster. This allows them to draw 2 cards into their hand. So after that player took that first one, that immediately gets refilled, they can now decide, do they want to exercise that power and draw a second card. They could again take one from the display or draw off the deck. Whenever a player starts their turn with no cards in their hand, they have to use the power of the Postmaster. So for example, on the very first turn of the game, when no players have cards, they'll have to select the Postmaster and they'll take 2 cards into their hand. Next, players must play 1 card from their hand to their display. When it's the first card, obviously it can be any city on the board. Subsequent plays on later turns have to be adjacent to either end of a city in their display. So on a subsequent turn, that would be a legal play because Augsburg is adjacent to Ulm. On a player's turn, if they haven't already selected an official to use their power, they could select the Postal Carrier, which allows them to play 2 cards from their hand to their display. So let's say this player hadn't used any of the special powers yet. They decide to extend the route on this end by going from Ulm to Sigmaringen, and on this side they decide to go from Augsburg to Kempten. So we can see that's legal because Ulm can extend out that way, and then from here this one can extend down here. It's important to remember that you can never play the same city twice, so the route can't loop back to itself. Also, if you're ever unable to play a legal card during your turn, any cards that you have in your route automatically get discarded without scoring. If that happens, you would just discard your cards and then just start a new route from one of the cards in your hand. The final step of a player's turn is they have the option of scoring this route if it's at least 3 cards or more. So they can decide to keep building this route, or since this is at least 3 cards, they can score it now. The first step in scoring a route is to acquire the next carriage size if the route is greater than your current carriage size. So this player doesn't have any carriages right now. This route is 4 cards long, so they would be eligible to acquire the next carriage. You're never allowed to skip. So even though their route was 4 cities long, they don't have the 3 carriage yet. So they have to start with the 3 carriage. Let's say this was a later turn and they already had the 4 carriage and they decided to score this route. The final official that you can use is the Cartwright. This will give you +2 cards to your route when trying to claim a new carriage. So the route was only 4, so they could only get the 4 carriage, which they already have. Let's say they didn't use an official's power, so now they want to use the Cartwright. So this would turn this from 4 + 2 into possibly 6. So they'd go up here. We know they cannot skip carriages, so even though they're eligible to get that by using the Cartwright's power, they have to go in order so they could take the 5 here. But they did effectively use that power by at least increasing this to be eligible to take the 5. So after possibly claiming the next higher carriage card, the next step in scoring is to place houses. Players may place houses either in all cities of one color or one city of each color. So this player has the option of placing, they could place 2 houses in the light brown, so on both these cities, or they could place 1 house here, 1 house here, which is a different color, and then 1 house in either of these is a different color. So let's say this player decides to put 1 house in each color. So they put the 1 house there, the 1 house there. They had to choose between Kempton or Augsburg. Let's say they choose Kempton. Players only get 1 house per city. Multiple players can be in the same city, so the red player can come and also put a house here. The next step of scoring after placing houses is to see if you're eligible to claim any of the bonus tiles. So the first one are the scoring regions. So to get the top one from this stack, the player would have to have a house in all cities in this scoring region. So they need to get 1 house there. If they did have that house there, and maybe that was the final house for the scoring region, they simply take the top one on the stack and they can turn it face down in front of them. But we can see they're still 1 house away from scoring that region. And on your turn, you can claim as many bonus tiles as possible. The other type of bonus tile are the carriage length or the carriage route lengths. So if you close a route, this one was only 4, but if you at least had 5 here, you could take the top one from here. If you had 6, you can take the top VP chip there, or if you had 7, you could take the top one there. If the stack that you're trying to claim is empty, you can take the one from a lower stack. So let's say you closed an 8 or a 9 city route. There aren't 8 or 9 city victory point chips, so you could take one from the 7 stack. If you closed a 7 route and this stack was completely empty, you could take one from the next stack. You don't have that option unless the stack is empty. So let's say you closed a 7 and maybe all the victory points were gone except the 1, you have to take this one. You're not allowed to take the 6 even though it's higher. If there's one available, you're obligated to take it. One other point with the route length victory point chips is you can claim multiple of these. So if you claim a 7 and then another 7, you can keep taking the highest chip on the stack versus something like this. Once you score the region, you can only score that once because you can never place multiple houses in a city. One other reminder about the special powers. The Cartwright special power only assists you in getting a higher carriage type. It does not help you in claiming a higher route length. So if you closed 4 and used the cart right, you're only eligible based on the number of actual cards you've actually closed to claim these. Here are the final 2 types of victory point chips. This is the all provinces. So if you have a house in at least one house in all of the 9 different colors in the game, you can claim the top one on that stack. This one is given to the player that triggers the end game. The end game is going to be triggered when a player either takes the 7 carriage card or places their final post office house on the game board. And finally, once you finish all the steps in scoring, you can simply take these cards, put them in the discard. You also have to discard your hand down to a maximum of 3 cards. So let's say you scored your route and you still had 5 cards in your hand. You can have unlimited cards in your hand until you score. Once you score, it's at that point you've got to discard down to a maximum of 3 cards. The final round of the game is going to get triggered when either a player claims the 7 carriage card or they place their final post office on the game board. When a player triggers that, you'll remember they take this victory point chip and then we finish the round. So whichever players haven't gone that round get their final turn, and then the game will end and we'll go to final scoring. A player's final score, let's say this was the end state for a player, will be the victory points for their highest carriage, not all their carriages, just the highest. So since this player was only able to get to a 5 carriage, they get 5 victory points, plus all the victory points from their chips, minus 1 victory point for each house they weren't able to get on the game board. So we can see this player's score is 5, 15, 20, minus 2. So their final score would be 18. You'll add up all player scores. Highest victory points is the winner. If there is a tie between the tied players, if the player was able to acquire that, that would break the tie, or who was ever closest to the player that acquired this in clockwise order. And that should be everything you need to set up and play Thurn and Taxis.